Session. So if you need to share it with colleagues or refer to it afterwards, just reach out to me after the event. Let me know you'd like a copy of it. It takes a few minutes to get it all converted properly, but I will make it available to you after the session. If you have questions throughout the session, it's preferable to put it in the Q&A as opposed to the chat. The Q&A does get recorded in the transcription, whereas the chat does not. So if I'm not able to get to your questions through the session, I can get back to you after the fact and answer those questions for you. So thanks again for joining. Today we're going to talk about AR automation for Sage. We integrate with both Sage 300 and Sage Intacct. My demonstration, when I get to that part, is going to use Sage 300. I think from what I could tell on the registration list, we had more Sage 300 folks than Sage Intacct folks, but they do perform just about identically. And I will try to remember to point out any minor differences that there might be as we go through some of the features and functions. So just to get things rolling here, just give you a little bit of information about who North49 is, and maybe some of you know us already. We've been around for a very long time in the Sage space. At least the principals involved in the organization have been so under various different organizations, myself included. I've been with Sage for about 8 years, now part of North49. And the founders were also Sage partners, Sage development partners for a very long time. In fact, in the Sage 300 world, many of the products we built over the years were actually acquired by Sage, and they had us build them straight into the Sage 300 source code. And we publish another product called Webtelligence, which is a fully integrated web store to Sage 300. And sort of a component of that was the customer portal, which we now package and market as a separate standalone product, which is what we're going to talk about today. And that's the one that also integrates into Sage Intacct. Just over a year ago, I think it was back in May of last year, we were acquired by a company called Evo Payments, and they are a global payment provider. So credit cards, ACH payments. And then back in March of this year, Evo was acquired by Global Payments, a much bigger payment processing company. So now North49 is part of Global Payments. So we are a very large entity that does software like North49 does for customer payments, customer self-service, as well as payment processing. So now we are able to provide that complete solution from the customer-facing presentment of invoices and orders and all that kind of thing, right down to the full-on payment processing. So that's a bit of history about us. So what do we do to help? So the customer portal itself is a way for you to provide easy and instant, real-time, anytime access to your customers, to their accounts inside of Sage, be it Sage 300 or Sage Intacct. And we can expose, or that is to say, you can expose any of the documents that exist inside their account to them on the web to do things like look up old invoices, reprint them, check order statuses, pay their invoices online through a secure payment process. And honestly, that's probably one of the biggest reasons why companies will get the customer portal, is to allow their customers to pay them online anytime, 24/7. And you're going to see a bit of a quote from a customer of ours who implemented the portal to do the payment processing side of things. And they managed to save a full-time equivalent employee. Now, if you just think about the time it takes for you to process a payment from a customer. So let's say it goes from contacting the customer, collecting the credit card details, going to potentially a virtual terminal or even the pad that sits on your desk and entering that information in there, getting what's called the post back from the processor, taking that information and then posting that into Sage against that invoice and customer. That entire process can probably take anywhere from 10 to 15, sometimes longer. And if you start to add up how many times you do that in a month, you'll find that the ROI on this product comes pretty fast. I know that a customer said they saved one full-time equivalent staff member. And I think depending upon how much of this you're doing, how many of these invoices you're processing, it can be even faster than that. The product is relatively inexpensive. So here's that quote I'm talking about from that customer on the very top line here. Their process was very manual, very time consuming, as which probably is for a lot of folks. So it did provide significant value to them. And we haven't even started to talk about the opportunity cost of what you can do with that time that you save. And that perhaps could get applied to other revenue generating activities or providing better customer service to your customers from reach out campaigns or things of that nature. If you're in the Sage 300 space, you probably recognize Orchid Business Systems. They're probably one of the biggest sort of tech partners or ISVs, development partners that produce products for Sage. They have a bunch of products, probably one of the more widely used partners out there. And they use our customer portal for their partners to service their customers. They provide all their activation codes, all their invoicing, all the payments, all that stuff. So they use ours. So if you're a Sage partner and you work with Orchid, and you're paying your bills online, it's our portal that they're using to do that. And they make significant savings as well, as you can see from Steve here, who's one of the owners of the company. They save at least 2 days a month just by incorporating our portal into their work. So the expectation from customers is they want this self-serve access, right? They want to be able to do the things that they want to do without having to reach out to you during business hours or when you might be available and waiting on the phone on hold or whatever the case might be. So they want that ability. So the beauty of this is by giving them that, there's also other significant benefits for you as the merchant, which means you're reducing that administrative overhead to deliver those things that they're asking for. So online payments we talked about, things like, can you resend me my invoice? I can't find it. Or what's my order status? When's it going to be delivered? Or anything like that. What we call those low value customer interactions they could easily do for themselves, and they want to do them for themselves. And again, we haven't talked about how much of the paper you can save. When you start emailing the invoices out to your customers, you reduce all that printing, folding, stuffing, mailing, all that goes away. So all of this translates into saving your staff time, and then of course saving you money in the end. And then what's the opportunity value, I guess, of reapplying that labor elsewhere in the business? It can be something as simple as adding a click to pay link on your invoice document. And it's very easy to do. And it just allows them to do that. They click on the link, and I'll show you this live. Click on the link, and it takes them to this page, lets them pay that invoice document. Or on the other side of it, there's the full portal in behind it, and it allows them to do many more things that are specific to their account inside of Sage. And this is a live read and feed of data inside of Sage. We communicate through a component we call Connect, and it's really just a web service. It sits on your Sage 300 server and waits for us to send it a question. And then it queries Sage and brings us back the answer and puts it on the screen for the customer to see. So the portal itself doesn't have any data. It reads it live from Sage. We do use a Sage user license in the process of doing that, so please do bear that in mind. We do require one exclusively for our use. That way we're ensured that every customer who tries to log in can get access and can do the things that they want to do, like pay bills and look up order statuses and all that kind of stuff. There's even a quick order entry form. So I don't want to go so far as to say this is a web store. I mean, our web store product, Webtelligence, does the full web store thing with all the categories and navigation and pretty pictures and all that kind of stuff. This is really just an online OE form that a customer can use to quickly get an order into the system. Specifically business to business, we do need an AR account to process against so we can serve up their pricing, their products, all that kind of thing, and all their ship to locations. But it came along early on in the pandemic because folks needed a way to get online very quickly and allow their customers to order from them. Web store can obviously do that, but it takes time to build. This can be deployed very quickly and very low overhead. Now, the customer portal itself is kind of a set and forget kind of an application. Once all the elements are in place and we get it configured, it just does what it does. You don't need to babysit it. So all the things we just sort of alluded to initially here, and I'll show you that live in the portal itself, allows this to happen 24/7, and you don't have to babysit it. As long as that Connect component is running and there's a user license available, your customers can self-serve any time of the day or night. So enough of the slide deck. Let's have a look at the actual product. I see a question here. Clarify that North49 needs an exclusive license for Sage. Not sure I understand if we have paid for Sage product. So the answer is inside of Sage, now this is not true for Sage Intacct, of course. Sage Intacct, we connect through web services. We don't require a user license. Through Sage 300, there's a user license. They call it a LAN pack. This is just an ability for a user to gain access to the various systems inside of Sage. So in the case of Sage 300, we do require a Sage user license. And your Sage reseller can get that, acquire that for you. It's just like you having one, so you can process orders or payments or whatever inside of Sage. The customer portal uses that. We consume one user license, but you could have 1,000 people using the portal, including staff. So we only ever consume that one user license. So I hope that answered the question. And yes, you would need an additional user if you do not have a spare one in your configuration. So what I'm going to talk about first of all is our click to pay. And really this is just your ability to embed a link right on your invoice document inside of Sage and have that go out to the customer. I've just mocked it up here on a Word document. So you can see the URL that shows up here, how we direct the click to pay to go to the portal and allow customers to pay this. So first of all, that URL you see there, that's going to be a subdomain of your domain. So it's going to be portal.mydomain.com or customer.mydomain.com, whatever you want that to be. The point is, it's not going to be our domain. Your customers will feel comfortable that it's your domain they're going to, they're not being phished. And then the next thing we do is we feed it the customer number, which is the AR account number. And we also feed it the document number. In this case, it's the invoice number. And all your customer has to do is click that, that link or button or whatever you've created in there. And then it pops up that screen like we showed you. So you see that slight delay that it showed there? After we fed the customer number and the invoice number, what we did is we sent that query off to Sage through Connect and that LAN pack we spoke about. And we made sure that this was an invoice for this customer and it was still open to pay. And if those things were all true, we filled in the rest of this information for the customer so that they could pay it. Now this shows what's left on that invoice to pay. And you notice this is an editable field right now. It doesn't have to be. That's your option to turn that on or off. I know some people don't like to allow partial payments. It's either pay the full invoice or don't pay it. And if you've got a dispute, let's settle the dispute. But I don't want to create an administrative burden for me to have to deal with after the fact because of a part payment. But obviously, there's reasons why you may want to allow that. So that's why it's an option here. So for this particular customer, and depending upon what type of merchant account gets set up, we can do credit card or we can do the electronic check or what's referred to as ACH in the US. In Canada, it's referred to as EFT. And that allows them to go ahead and make that payment. So when I click that pay invoice button, what happens is we now pop up, I think this is an iframe inside here, but this is now going to the payment processor software. We've temporarily left the portal software. And the reason we do that is so that all the PCI compliance and security requirements now land with the processor and not on the portal and not with you as the merchant. So you don't have any PCI compliance issues. It's ours to deal with as the payment processor. So you have to enter in the basic details here and hit that pay button. And what happens now is we send that transaction off to the processor. And ideally, we get back a positive response saying, we've got the money. And so on screen, we'll present this receipt to the customer, which they can print. You optionally also have the ability to send an email to the email address that sits on the AR account for that customer with all this same information in it. That's an option. You can do that or not. That's up to you because they do have it here to show. At the same time, what happens is, first of all, we will send this transaction, if you're in Sage 300, into an AR receipt batch that is there and open for credit cards, and we will append a line into that receipt batch. If there is not one open, we will open one, and we will append it into that into that new AR receipt batch that we just opened. Question here about adding a CC fee, which is often called the convenience fee. It's not in the product as yet. It is something that is being built into the product in a future release. I don't have a date to share with you right now. I'm afraid I'd have to check with our product management to find out when they have it in there, but it is something we get asked about fairly frequently. So it's on the roadmap to get put in there. No information to share as to a timing on that one as yet. In the case of Sage Intacct, we just insert that directly into the bank, into the, against the invoice against that customer. So it all gets settled automatically. There's nothing you have to do to finish that transaction. In Sage 300, you just post a batch and it's all done and reconciled properly. There is messaging that you can also get internally. So when this payment gets made, you can, at your option again, have an email sent to yourself to whatever email address or distribution list you want that to go to. You can have a Slack message sent if you happen to be using that for communication internally, or a Microsoft Teams message could also be sent. So any one of those three communication methods can be sent to you internally to let you know this has happened. And so this is great if you happen to be in a collection proceeding with a customer and you want to know the instant they pay. That's your instant notification that this has happened, and you know that they paid it, how much they paid, what invoice they paid, and by what method. So that was click to pay. And that's really all they can do because we haven't asked them to log in. So basically, we just let them pay that invoice document after we've checked its validity, and that's it. That's all they can do. Before I log in here, let me just talk about a couple of things on this page. So number one, there's a few things that you would control as the merchant. This up here is yours to change. You would make that your logo. And if you wanted to put some messaging up here, there's quite a bit of real estate we've allocated. So it's just an image file. You point to a new image file, that's what shows up there. We support English and French. So any of these fields that we control, we will change. And they can stay that way. We'll attempt to drop a cookie if the customer accepts cookies, but otherwise they would just select their language here. And you can select your default language in the back end as well. You also control this messaging here. That's your welcome message to your customer. And this down here is also yours to control. To get customers registered to use the portal, there's a couple different ways you can do it. So if you want to completely control it, you can. So you would log into the admin side, and I'll show you that once we get through the user-facing side of this. And then you would create the users and send an email out to your user base and say, great new portal, here's your temporary credentials, please change your password, yada, 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 all that stuff. But you have to do it all. Another way that I think most folks will do is allow them to self-register. And how that works is they will create a username for themselves. And you can have more than one user for any one AR account. So multiple users for your customer can do this on their behalf. They do need to know their AR account number. And we do ask them for a bit of verification. So one of 5 questions that we can ask them, and I'll show you what they are once we have a look in the back end. But they have to answer that question correctly in order for us to grant them immediate access, which we can do, again, at your option. This is a switch that you set. So once they've registered here, and if they answered that question correctly, we can give them immediate access. And if we do that, you also have the option to send an email, again, to that AR email address to let them know we've granted access to this user. And if for some reason they did not want that to be the case, it's very easy to turn them off, and I'll show you that in the back end. Just a click of a mouse and they're shut down. The other option at this point is you don't give them immediate access, but they wait for you to authorize them to have access. And again, in the back end, you just look for anybody who's waiting to be authorized, verify whatever you need to verify, and click to turn them on, and away you go, they're set up. So, 3 different kind of levels of effort, I guess, on your part to get a customer set up. So let me give you a look at what the customer-facing side looks at. So the first thing that might happen, and this works both on the Sage Intacct side of things and the Sage 300 side of things, is we may pop up a message here if you're utilizing this functionality. So let me show you in Sage 300. That's within the customer record. And we've created a comment type we call web. So if the first thing the portal will do is go and look, is there a comment type called web against this customer? And if so, please pop it up on the screen. And that's what we did here. And once they click OK, what happens is, let me just navigate away and back to this guy. We change it to acknowledge, so you know that they've seen that message. So this is a one-on-one communication between you and that specific customer. In Sage Intacct, it's kind of similar. Here's Sage Intacct. Here's the typical demo customer. What we did in Sage Intacct's case is we created a new tab called Customer Notes, and this is the message that would pop up. And once they've read it, we actually add a line up here that shows us they've read it, time, date, stamp, who the user was, so that you know that they've seen it and when. So that's how it works inside of Sage Intacct. This was the Sage 300 way. Back to the portal. This one here, this is what we call a broadcast message. So this is controlled in that portal back end again, and it goes to everybody. So this would be a message like office hour change, holiday hours, policy changes, anything that everybody needs to know about. And again, when they click OK, it goes away, won't keep popping up to bother them. So this is the various functionality that's available should you subscribe to all the options. So there's really 3 levels. Number 1, the standard portal, which would include the account activity, view transactions, view orders, and contact us. If you opt for the online payments add-on option, it's pay account, prepayment, and manage credit cards. And if you want the quick order entry function, it's the order entry icon here. So whatever you subscribe to will determine which of these shows up, but you also have control over these as well on the back end. Simple checkbox turns them on and off if you want them to show up or not. Let me give you a quick look at what's inside each of these ones. So this is really just summary level information about my account. Here's my last few payments. Here's my last few invoices, basic information about my account. Where the good stuff comes in is when you actually start to see all the documents that are available inside of Sage for me as a customer. So remember I said earlier that we do not have any data on board in our data centers for the customer portal. It is a multi-tenant sort of hosted SaaS offering. Basically, that means that there's one product that serves up all customers, but you all have your own instance of it that serves up for your customers. So by default, this is all the Sage 300 documents that are available. Sage Intacct only has 4 different document types. I think it's invoice, invoice, debit note, credit note. There's one more. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. At any rate, you can also turn these on and off. So if you don't want interest showing up there, turn it off. It doesn't show up. If you don't want refunds showing up there, check off the box. Doesn't show up there. But the customer also has the ability to filter these down to just the documents that they're interested in seeing. And we're looking at both AR and OE invoices. So here's an AR, I think it's an AR detail invoice because it's got some description here. And this is an OE invoice, order entry invoice, lots more detail available inside of order entry. So when I clicked on that link to show me this invoice layout, it was at that point in time when we actually went to Sage, did that query through Connect, and brought back all this data and put it on the screen here for this customer in a layout that looks like an invoice, right? Think of it like if you're in Sage 300, your crystal forms that you have for invoices and stuff. They're just data elements on a page somewhere that have been coded onto that crystal form. Well, this is kind of the same thing. It's just done in HTML. So we're just taking data and putting it in a format on the page that looks like an invoice. And if they want to reprint that, they can certainly do so. We do ship with this standard layout. We do indicate that it's a web copy because it may not look identical to the one that you're printing out of Sage. So that's what's going to tip them off that that's why that's the case. And of course, that's going to be your logo and such at the top here, whatever you put on that particular place. So they can reprint this, they can save it to a PDF, they can do whatever they would like to do with that document. And that holds true with any of these documents inside of Sage that they want to have a look at. They all have that drill down capability into their payments, into their invoices, that type of thing. And if they only want to see the ones that have a balance left on them, they just click on that guy and it just shows them the outstanding ones. On the pay account screen, really what this does is exposes all the open invoice documents for this particular customer. And most customers probably don't have a whole ream of documents in here that they want to pay, so they could easily just click the select all and pay them all, or if they want to selectively pay them. And notice again, this is turned on. It doesn't have to be. Clicking on the line will expand it so you can see all the line items on there. And if they want to click on that again, it'll close it down. If they want to go ahead and make a payment this way, we do have the ability to store the encrypted card token. So your customer has the option to enter a credit card through the payment process and then elect to save it as a stored card token. So that next time they want to make a payment, they just hit that make payment button. Don't have to enter their card details again. We have them, we can use them again. The next thing they see on the screen is the receipt. And all the stuff that we spoke about before through that click to pay, all that stuff happens in the background. Notifications get sent out to people, and you get notifications internally. It's automatically inserted into Sage in the appropriate place and all that stuff. And the same holds true with the ACH or the EFT side of things if you're in Canada. You just enter, what type of bank it is, the bank or the account number, the routing number, All that stuff gets entered in there and we process it exactly the same way. In Sage 300, there's a few different ways we can accept a prepayment. In Sage Intacct, there's only the one, and it's this guy up here, and it's an advance payment. In Sage 300, I think they call it an unallocated cash payment. So you would just provide some reference as to why you're giving us the money, how much you want to pay, hit that make payment, and then it's just going to sit on their AR account waiting for you to apply it to something in the future. In Sage 300, we also have the ability to apply it against an order or against a quote. So if you require folks to prepay their orders or quotes, you can do so here, and that will get tracked alongside that order as it gets entered into Sage. On the managed credit card side of things, this just exposes the cards that they have chosen to store. And again, that's the encrypted card tokens. That's what we're allowed to have to stay on the right side of PCI compliance. But all they can really do here is delete it, in which case we mark it as inactive and they can't use it again. It doesn't show up again. Under the view order side of things, there's some interesting things that go on here. So in Sage 300, we support all the different order types inside of Sage. And we can also view this by outstanding order, or not just outstanding, but all orders or items. So here's all the items that are still sort of sitting in the system for me, and here's the orders that they sit on. Inside of Sage Intacct, we do support draft, quotes, and orders as well, should you want to deploy that. This status here is something that we can sort of glean directly from what we see going on inside of Sage. We know if it's been partially shipped or shipped. We know if it's an approved quote. We know if it's been invoiced. So these icons over here, depending upon this status, will provide different information. So one that's been partially shipped, we're going to provide the shipment information here. One that's been invoiced, we're going to provide the invoice information here, which you can drill down on or click that plus sign. It just expands the lines. If you had a tracking number in that field inside of Sage, it's going to show up there. In a case where you're doing quotes, if you happen to be using that inside of Sage, there's a few ways you might use this, but here's a situation where I've got a quote in the system and it's approved. So perhaps this was a staff member who created this quote inside of Sage, and as soon as that's done, it's available to be viewed on the portal by the customer. So let's say your staff member has created this quote, the customer comes here and has a look, likes what they see, they click that button, and you can actually turn that quote into an active order inside of Sage, ready to fulfill, or it could come in on hold as well, depending upon how you want that to happen. But considering it's a quote already sort of approved by your staff, one would presume that that would go in as ready to fulfill. There's another way you might use this, and it's kind of in conjunction with this order entry screen, because you can either activate the place quote or place order. You could do one or both. It's really up to you which of these you want to make active. But if you're doing it on a quote basis, then what might happen is your customer might submit for a quote. It comes into your system on hold, like something like, where's a quote that's on hold? Here's one that's waiting approval. So that might have been something submitted by a customer. Somebody internally reviews it and then changes it to approved. At that point, it becomes ready to be turned into an order. So if you'd like to utilize this sort of form for customers to submit for a quote, you can do that. And then have someone review it internally and allow the customer then to turn that into an active order. So let's talk a little bit about this screen. So I am logged in. So we do know from the portal standpoint who this customer is. We know if you've got a specific price list set up for that customer, and that will dictate what price they get to pay and what products sit on that price list, which they are eligible to buy. We do know all their ship to locations. We can even allow them to enter a new one. I don't think that's an option within Intacct, but it is within Sage 300. You can provide a PO number, some shipping instructions, all that good stuff. Now remember, we don't have any data here. So in order for me to get some information here on this add item line, I have to type in at least 3 characters of an item number, the item description, inside of Sage 300, any of the 4 additional item information lines that sit on that item record, or within Sage Intacct, I think it's a web description that we also search. And in Sage 300, we also search the customer item number if you happen to be maintaining that. Sometimes folks will maintain their customer's item number so they can order by their own item number, in which case we then convert it into your item number as we get that order populated into Sage. So after all that preamble, customer types in at least 3 characters, either hits the enter key or this finder. We then run out to Sage, bring back everything that satisfied what I typed in there, and now I got my list of things that I can select from. So if I'm, as a customer, I'm very familiar with my items that I want to buy. This is a replenishment order. I do this every month. I can just do this entirely keyboard driven. If there were multiple units of measure in here, I can pick the unit of measure I want, change my quantities, and just carry on and either place an order or quote whatever you've activated here. And that's going to end up in Sage order entry, probably on hold, I would suggest in most cases, because I think a lot of folks like to have somebody review an order prior to releasing it to production or to fulfillment, in case somebody's done something dumb, like I typed 1,000 and I meant 100 or 10 or whatever the case might be. So anyway, it's up to you. You can have it on hold. You can have it ready to fulfill. There is an employee login that we also have here, which is going to give them exactly the same experience as the customer is getting here. Only difference is the first thing we ask them is which customer do you want to work with. So once they get the customer record up, they can do all this same stuff I just talked about through all these different functions, including this order entry. But you can optionally give them the ability to change that price if that's something that you provide to your staff. So that's one sort of way to use this. Now, if for some reason there was something that the customer wasn't entirely sure, is that the right thing? By checking this box on here, we can show additional item detail. So does that one have a picture? Yes. So I talked about the 4 additional item information lines in Sage 300. That's what's showing up here. If this was Sage Intacct, this would be that web description that's showing up in that record. And you can store images against those items as well, multiple images if you want, and then we can actually display them here. So, and here's a case where we got multiple units of measure. We can then choose the unit of measure we want for that particular product and then add that to our list, to our order, sorry. And again, I can place that order, I can place that quote, that ends up straight inside of Sage as an order in those either as a draft and intact or as an active order or within Sage 300, either on hold or ready to fulfill. I've got a question here. I'm just going to quickly read it. Can you provide only access to pay by it? No, yes. So the question is, can you really determine if you can pay only by ACH or by credit card? And yes, we do have the ability with the use of an optional field to control by customer, which customers may pay by which method. And on top of that, within the admin side, you can actually put a dollar threshold as to how high you're willing to go on credit card, and anything above that must be ACH. So yes, the question is, you can do that. So basically everything I've showed you here is the customer facing side of the portal. And what our intention here was to make it very simple and intuitive to use, that it wouldn't require a bunch of training to let your customers use it. And I think we've accomplished that. I would expect that most folks should be able to navigate through here without too much difficulty and make all this stuff work pretty well. So hopefully you agree with that. And feel free to fire any questions back at me through the Q&A. So now what I'd like to do is show you at least a brief look at the administrative back end to the portal. So this would be you logging in as the owner of this portal, and these are the things that you can see and control within it. Now, before I wade into all of this stuff, let me just say that this isn't an area that you're going to need to go into on a frequent basis, periodic at best, but it's here for you to make changes or whatever you might need to do should the need arise. So first of all, this is just a dashboard that shows up to tell you what's going on my portal. How many receipts have I got, either by dollar amount or by total numbers in these time frames? So just tells you how much money you're collecting through the portal. This tells you how many active users you've had on the portal over those same time frames. And remember, I said you can have more than one user on any one AR account. So customer is the AR account, user is users against those AR accounts. And this tells you just how many people are actually making use of your portal. So it kind of gives you a sense about how active it is, and you need to sort of give them a bit of a nudge to say, go check out the portal. It's really great. It's convenient. It's easy for you. This down here, this just tells you if there's a receipt that you've got from the credit card processor, but we weren't able to insert it into Sage. Pretty rare that, that would happen, but it is possible. So if you think about the series of events that had to take place here, I had to be connected in order to get the invoice up to allow me to even pay it. And so I go through the payment process, entering my card details or whatever I was doing at that point, and I get the post back, or the portal gets the post back from the processor. At that point, we try to insert it into Sage. And the only reason this would be anything but zero is that we couldn't connect. And typically that means, I don't know, the internet went down at your site, or right in the middle of a backup or an upgrade, and that connect component got turned off, or Sage is temporarily unavailable for whatever reason. So as soon as it becomes available again, you just click that process button and we will insert that payment back into Sage. So it's not that you don't have the money. All that stuff happened. All that didn't happen was we didn't complete that transaction to append that into an AR receipt batch in Sage, or post it against that invoice inside of Sage Intacct. So that's that dashboard. This is where you would actually control all the users if you wanted to do it yourself. And so this is where that would happen, very much like that screen we looked at in the very beginning. There's 3 user types. So we just looked at the user. We're in the merchant now. Salesperson is the one I briefly mentioned, where it's the same kind of interface as what a user would see, except that we just asked them in advance, which user do you want to work with? So this is where you would control all that. And if we did that process in the beginning, where we gave them automatic access because they answered the skill testing question correctly, and if they got back to you and said, no, turn them off, we just let them go this morning, click that button, they're done. They are shut down, they can't access it. You'll see lots of great filter capabilities here, so you can always find somebody by any of these filter criteria inside your list of users. And we did talk about in the very beginning that broadcast message. That's just where you control that. This tab here tells you all of the transactions or all of the payments that have been made or have been attempted to have been made on the portal. So when you get one that's been successful, you'll get the authorization code, all the detail about that payment. This little slider here tells you it's been inserted into Sage, so you know that transaction is complete. This one down here, that's basically saying for some reason this transaction did not complete. So you may have a customer who went on there and started the process, thinks they finished it, but actually for some reason did not. You're going to find that in here, and you'll be able to tell them if they call you up and say, I made a payment, I don't see it. Well, here it is. Now, another little point on top of that, now that we're owned by a payment processing company, we have our own product that's directly integrated into Sage 300 right now. Will be by the end of this quarter into Sage Intacct. So that means you can use it, forget about the portal. Let's say the portal is not even involved. That product can work directly inside of Sage for you to process payments inside of Sage. Works in 300 now, Sage Intacct by the end of the quarter. So it has its own portal where you can go and get lots of information and reports about the payments and things like that. This is really just kind of a snapshot of what went on inside the portal itself. The portal settings, this is where you get to control things like your logo and things like that. We mentioned the 5 kind of skill testing questions to get automatic access. Here they are. If you want to turn your portal off completely, that switch will do it. Inside of Sage 300, there's a flag on the AIR account that's called Allow Web Store Shopping. If you want to make use of that, you can also turn this flag on here, and we will then first check to see if that flag is turned on for that customer as to whether or not we allow them to have access to the portal at all. So some folks may want to make use of that. And this is where you turn on that self-registration and that auto approval. And then this is where you control what's that image up here look like. That's where you'll just tell us, use this image instead and save it. That's your address. Here's your welcome message. All that stuff's right here. It's just text you type in there, pretty simple. And I did mention kind of early on, you had the ability to more granularly control which of the functions showed up there, meaning which of the menu items, which of the icons showed up. This is where you turn those on and off. This here is where you control which documents the customer can actually see. If you don't want them to see interest, you don't want them to see refunds, you just turn them off, click save. They do not show up for them to, to see or select. Other things in here that are of interest, I don't want to go through all of this stuff. We take care of all this upon the onboarding. Our guys will help you get this all set up so you don't have to worry about all this stuff. But once you get it set up, it just does what it does. You don't have to worry about it. But we did talk about some of the messaging that happens way back in the beginning. So in the case of Sage 300, that connect component I spoke about is within your control, not ours, because it's on your server, wherever that happens to be, in the cloud, on premise, doesn't matter. But if for some reason a customer is trying to connect and they can't, we're going to know about that, but we can't do anything about it if it's got something to do with that connect component or Sage 300's availability. So we need to inform somebody internally on your site that there's an issue. Someone's trying to connect, they can't, please check into it. 99% of the time, it's probably because Connect got turned off. You just did a backup, it didn't get turned back on, something like that. Super easy fix. You know, it's just, it sits on your desktop. You double click on it, click the restart button, I think it is, and away you go, back in business. So we just need to be able to tell somebody about it. And how do we do so? We do it by email, we do it by Slack, we do it by Teams. You get to determine those things. The same holds true on the AR side of things. There's a few reasons we would notify somebody about this. Again, your choice, which ones you want to see or don't see, but a new user registered, you got a payment, or somebody tried to do a transaction, but they didn't complete it. Who do we tell and by what method? And the same is true with that OE form. Who do we want to tell internally that somebody has placed an order? Now, the order does end up in Sage, of course, but you may want to action it more quickly as opposed to just waiting it to go through the normal cycle of process. So who do we want to tell? Somebody on the sales team, somebody on the fulfillment team, who needs to get notified that this has happened and by what method? And you might have noticed at the very beginning, there was a contact us form. It's really just a feedback form that allows them to send you a notice of some kind. How do you want to respond to them immediately, and who do you want that to go to, and by what method? And these are the different customer notifications that can get sent out. We talked about the new user registration. If somebody places an order, we can actually send them an email with the order details as well, that they would see it on screen too, or that they made a payment. All that stuff can be sent to them by email as well. So I don't need to get into all the other detail in here. Suffice it to say that we will handle most of this stuff for you. And once the things all get set up, you don't really have to go back in here and mess around with this. It just does what it does, unless you wanted to change some of those things I just talked about, or maybe change that broadcast message or check for a receipt or something like that. But you don't have to go in here and babysit this thing. It kind of just does what it does. So that's a brief look at the back end of this thing. Pretty straightforward. Any further questions? Just going to quickly check the Q&A here. Don't see any new questions. So let me just pop back to my presentation here for a sec. Before I do that, actually, let me do one thing. Let me show you what the pricing of this looks like. You can see this on our website. In the case of Sage 300, we're what's known as an endorsed solution. So basically what that means is Sage sells us directly to you through their partner channel, just like you buy your Sage 300 products. But if you're interested in the pricing, it's here. There's a one-time setup fee. And here's all the different options. You do require this first column. These other two are optional add-ons, one or both. And the Canadian pricing is in the tiny print there. Sorry about that. In the case of Sage Intacct, same again, similar page. There's all the pricing for Sage Intacct. So do work through your Sage partner, whoever you work with. We do know most of them, and we work sort of hand in hand with them to make sure that everything gets done appropriately and with their knowledge, because we don't want to, you know, somehow inadvertently do something that's going to impact other applications you might have installed there. Again, we're very low overhead, low footprint. I think I've never come across an instance where we have had a negative effect on any other add-on product that was in there, but we do want to make sure that your Sage partner is aware if something is going on there, so that they know what all applications you have installed on your system. And with that, I think that's it. Questions? Don't see anything popping up in the Q&A box nor the chat. So hopefully I've been able to make it clear enough that you get a general understanding. If you want to dig into this a little bit deeper on your specific situation, please reach out to me. I'm happy to get on a call with you on a one-on-one, do this with other colleagues in your business and show them and answer specific questions about your situation. Happy to do it. Just let me know and we'll make it happen. We do have a question. Multiple payment terms. I see. Yeah, we're not working with the with any discounts at the moment, Jamie, but Jaime, but we are. That is something that's on the wish list, I guess, or on the enhancement list to sort of take a look at that. The discount if you pay early kind of thing. That's sort of in the works, being at least sussed out as to how we can deal with that. Currently not today, but in the future release, very likely. Hope that answered the question. Anybody else? Well, if that's it, then I'll leave you with it. And again, please feel free to reach out to me if there are any questions. Happy to answer it and do a one-on-one if necessary. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.